think that's something that's really important. And with these associations and with your members, I think, leverage and collaborate with your members, because I think there's a lot of opportunities there for things like, guest blogs, building community, building directories. All these things can really, really help you in your SEO, but also help your members as well. So I think that's something they should look at as well.
Hi, welcome to the Gripe podcast. In this podcast, we learn how to grow member-based organizations. I'm your host Farhad Khan. I am the CEO of Gripe Digital. We are a digital agency, and we help professional associations grow their membership by building membership websites. If you want to grow the membership of your professional association, please take a look at the workshops on our website at gripe.ca/workshops. That is grype.ca/workshops. This is a live recording of our podcast with a live audience. So if you're joining us live today, welcome. We'll take some questions from you. So if you do have any questions, please submit them on the chat on the right, and we will get to them as soon as we can. Today, we are joined with Brock Murray. Brock is an SEO consultant, and he's actually one of the best that I know of. He's the co-founder of SeoPlus. And full disclosure, I did have the chance to work with Brock once in the past, and together we were able to bring our website among the top 3 search results on Google. So I know that what he's going to talk about works. With that, let's get started. Brock, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. First of all, Farhad, I want to thank you for having me on the podcast. And of course, I remember all those years ago when we worked on that stuff together. A lot of fun. It was very enjoyable, and really looking forward to today's chat. So a little bit about myself. Been in the industry for a number of years. Started SeoPlus, so we're a digital marketing agency, almost 10 years ago now. And kind of what I do is started off doing SEO and helping businesses with their digital marketing strategies. And now less involved with the day-to-day on campaigns, but more so, building a team of digital marketers and just helping clients achieve their online marketing goals.
Wonderful. Brock, can you tell us in brief, for professional associations, why invest in SEO in brief?
I mean, there's a couple of reasons. I would say one, there's a ton of opportunity out there, right? To help grow your membership, grow your association. When you have SEO in mind and you're creating content and you're making your website accessible, there's a lot of opportunity to complement your growth goals. So that's one. And the second, I would say, is around avoiding potential pitfalls. So we've worked with associations in the past where they might have gone through a website redesign and SEO wasn't a consideration, and next thing you know, they've lost half their search traffic. That's a real life case. So definitely, I think it's important to have if there's not the knowledge internally in your organization, having a resource that you can kind of ask those questions to help avoid potential SEO pitfalls.
Right. So for an association, what are some of the main SEO areas you think we should focus on?
I would say very similar to any business. Probably there's three main areas I would focus on that are kind of current, and one being around mobile user experience. So this has been a trend for a number of years, back to even 2012, with the adoption of mobile. But now more than ever, I think it's really important to look at your website from a mobile first consideration. So thinking of your audience and your users when they hit that website and when they access your website, what is their experience going to be on their mobile device? So thinking about that first and foremost, thinking about things like overall speed, making sure when they land on that page that the page loads quickly, the images load quickly, that the layout's not shifting too much. That's just mobile experience in general is really important. There's a tool that you can use through Google called Page Speed Insights, where you can put your website in there, run it through their kind of tool, and it will give you some feedback on how good your user experience is. So that's one tool I would definitely recommend. The second pillar, I think, which is really important when we're talking about SEO, is just content, right? Creating content on your website, and content can come in many forms. It can be in the form of just a product or service page. It can be in the form of blog, FAQ, a case study, even video content. So just creating content, in-depth content, and just sharing your expertise, I think is a really good way to help your SEO, and that's how you're going to get found. And the third that I would focus on is what I call digital PR. So digital PR is essentially similar to your traditional PR, public relations, but in digital format. So the idea of generating placements online. So whether it's something similar to this, where you're in a podcast interview, where you might be featured in a publication or article, but with the goal of generating backlinks. And backlinks is when one website links to your website. And that's something that can really, really help your SEO or your search engine optimization. So just to summarize, mobile user experience, content, and digital PR are three things that you can focus on to really have SEO success.
Right. I just want to talk about content a bit. You mentioned that content should be in depth. Any thoughts on that? Like, what brings depth to content from the SEO world?
Well, from the SEO world, I think it's length, right? Is one big thing. So like, a lot of people will ask, how many words should I write? How much content should I write? So I think it's a balance of not writing too much where your audience is never going to read it with fluff. Obviously, if you have content that is going to add value, you can go more in depth. And Google it's coming out with ways of being able to sift through content and be able to find what the important parts of that content are. So for example, they have this algorithm called Smith, and I don't know if it's actively in use right now, but they've kind of announced it, where it can actually go through long form content and identify what are kind of the key topics within that piece of content. So what's cool about that is, rather than like creating smaller pieces of content on like multiple pages, you can create one bigger piece of content, and it can actually highlight the pieces that it finds important to the searcher's query. So it's a really cool kind of progression of search. So when you're thinking about how in depth you want to go with content, I think the really important thing is to look at what are the search results for the keywords you're trying to target, right? So if you're competing with certain sites, and how in depth are they? Because when you look at the first 10 search results for any given term, you can kind of evaluate, okay, well, this page, the first page has maybe 3,000 words of content. The second one has 2,000. The third one has 4,000. You're probably going to have to be in that range when you're creating that content, because that's typically what Google's kind of looking for, or the users are looking for. So I think that's an important consideration as well.
So there is no magic length, but you have to compare it with others.
Exactly. It's competitive analysis, looking at, right? For example, with associations, could be other similar associations in other regions, or it could even just be publications or industry publications that you're kind of competing with on those specific keywords. So that's kind of the key.
Right. So any advice on keyword selection?
Well, what we like to do with keyword selection is go through, I call it a keyword research process, but the first step in that is a brainstorm. So essentially, with our approach, what we'll do is we'll create like an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll create different columns for different things. So the first being branded searches, the second is product or service searches, the third will be your competitors. So we'll use a few different tools like SEMrush, where you put in your competitor's URL, you can pull up what are the keywords they're ranking for, use that as for your research as well. And then we'll look at things like audience terms, complementary terms, alternate terms, and then others. So we'll basically just, in the first step, is just throwing everything onto a spreadsheet, and including many members of your team. It could be the marketing person, it could be other people in the association, it could be we would provide some input. The more input you get at this stage, the better, because no idea is a bad idea at the brainstorming process, right? And then from there, what you'll do is you'll take that research and you'll use a few different tools. So for example, SEMrush, which is a keyword research tool, they have a specific tool in there called Keyword Magic Tool, where you can put in some of these ideas that you have in terms of potential keyword opportunities, and it will actually show you like related keywords, so you can help build a list of topics that you'd want to create content around. So it's a really, really cool process, and what that does, it gives you insight into what people are searching for, what the competition levels are for those keywords, and you can look in different regions. You can look in different, for example, in Canada, you might look in different cities, or you might want to look in the States if there's different search volumes there and different trends. So that's what's really good about this tool as well.
Right. So Brock, before we work with an SEO consultant, right? So if we are to maybe do some work in-house and then find out what potential keywords we should be targeting, do you have any advice on that?
I think the really important thing here is to identify, like, within the makeup of your team, what are your strengths? So I know a lot of organizations I work with, they only have one or two people on their, say, marketing team, right? Or they're not on the marketing team. There's one part of their responsibilities. So I think it's really important to identify what are your strengths as as an association. So it could be content development. You're extremely strong in developing content, and maybe you'll bring in a third party to kind of complement that in different ways, right? So for example, you might there's different there's the strategy component, there's implementation, there's reporting. So I think it's identifying like what pieces are you strong at and can you handle, and then what else do you need to bring in a third party partner to kind of take care of those maybe more technical areas or things that you're not as strong in.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Now, when we want to look at our like SEO and our digital marketing overall, and we do want to like rank among the top like 3 or 10 results on Google, maybe, how much of it do you recommend people do in-house before bringing in a consultant? How much research or anything? Yeah.
I think it depends, right? It depends on your goals, because sometimes with SEO, it's more maintenance mode, right? And you just want to like, let's set up a very basic strategy, a recurring strategy. We might do a couple blogs a month, and we want to set, some KPIs where we want to just have some insight into, the types of things we're gonna work on an ongoing basis. You might bring in a consultant on a one-time basis just to help you set things up, and then you can kind of maybe get a little bit of training and handle it yourself. However, some organizations they might have really lofty goals where they might need to bring someone in, on a more, bigger engagement, right? So I think, similarly to what I, mentioned earlier is if you can identify the things you can take care of in-house and things you can't, and then, obviously if you have higher goals, you're going to spend a lot more time. So I think it's kind of balancing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Alrighty. Now, one thing that we come across all the time, Brock, is that the SEO algorithms are changing. They're forever changing, right? So you catch up with one, and then like there's something new coming out. So how do we stay relevant?
That's tough. I mean, that's the biggest thing is I think, for myself and being in the SEO industry since really 2012, things are always changing every single day, and they've never stopped changing. And I think it's a challenge in the sense of you always have to be, staying up to date on by reading articles, by doing testing, by taking training. These are, it's a challenge in that sense because it's a lot of work. But I think the cool thing about it, there's a lot of opportunity. So, for us, similar to when we launched our business, the reason we were able to kind of grow our business was because in 2012, what happened was Google came out with this update. It was called Penguin, and it basically anyone who was doing like kind of it was a well-known practice at the time of link building, where people would create links through like comment kind of spam and stuff like that. It was a very common practice in SEO. But what happened is Google they came down and they laid the hammer on anyone doing that strategy. So what it did was any of the companies that were serving these customers, kind of their tactics weren't working anymore. So it brought a new opportunity of people who were creating content, utilizing social media, embracing mobile. So, with all the changes that are always happening, as long as you're staying on top of it, I think there's a lot of opportunity to capitalize on, some of these newer formats, because that's where a lot of these networks, even if you think about, social media with Instagram, they've come and said they're going to be pushing Instagram Reels. Reels is where the focus is going to be, short form video content. So I find that's where a lot of the opportunities in these newer formats, and sometimes they won't be successful. You look at LinkedIn stories, they brought it in, they realized it's not what their users are looking for, so they've kind of gotten rid of that feature. But sometimes, you can really, get some of the advantages of those new formats.
Right. So Brock, is it possible to create like any evergreen content? So any type of content that you actually create, and you will know that regardless of like what happens with the algorithms, you will actually be relevant? Are there methods?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key here is we call it kind of pillar content, right? So for example, as part of a blog strategy, typically what we'll do is we'll try to bucket your content in maybe 3 to 5 key pillars. And then what we would do is we create kind of child content that would link to that key pillar, right? So it's also called topic cluster is another kind of word for it. But essentially, if we can create content around these pillars, and the more content we create and the more people that are linking to us, the more people that are sharing on social media, it's all going to create, basically tell Google that we're an authority on this particular topic. And the more content you're creating, the more people are sharing it, again, the more value it's going to provide for you and the more searches you're going to generate, right? So I think that's the key is looking at what are those pillar topics you want to establish yourself as an authority on, and continuing to build that within your website. I think the good thing is you have control of your website. it's not going anywhere. One thing that happened yesterday, for example, was Facebook went down for, a number of hours, and
Oh my God.
right? So people were trying to do their launches and everything like that, and we're obviously struggling because you're on a third-party platform, but your website, you own it, and it's your content. So you have it's protecting you a little bit as well.
Right, right. So what you're saying is that we have to start with some pillar content, I guess, and then we need to create some child content that links back to the pillars, right? Okay.
Exactly.
And the pillar content will be the ones that your audience typically have questions around, or like how would you come up with the pillar content?
So it depends. It could depend on your business strategy, on your target market, on the type of things they're looking for. So it really depends. I know for us, for example, it's typically around our services. For example, for us, it might be around SEO could be a pillar content specifically. It could be around digital marketing in general. It could be around how to's. It could be around training. So it really depends on overall to see your objectives with your website and how you're trying to attract your target audience, and what your expertise is too, right? What are you able to create content around and become that authority? So I think it really is something when you're going through that keyword research process, it's something you'll draw out. You'll see those trends with the keywords that you kind of select. You'll kind of group those into topics, and it will kind of show itself as you go through that process.
Right, right. So I'm thinking for our association audience, I guess like what associations could probably do is that like go through some of the typical questions that members have, right? And then if they can probably like answer some of those questions on the articles, on the pillar content, that may be powerful.
Yeah, and pain points too for these businesses, right?
Ah,
Like what are
right.
some of the challenges they're facing? How can you help address those? And it's literally getting that content out there. And I think the thing is a lot of people overthink it sometimes, and a lot of times they have this content already. If you go through your email in the communications with some of their members, they've had these conversations, they've answered those questions. It could be on a static marketing material, maybe a brochure, a portfolio. Like a lot of this content is already out there. It's just kind of, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like take it and kind of turn it into a blog, right? I think that's the biggest thing.
So I think what you're saying is very powerful, Brock, that we don't actually have to reinvent the wheel and like create, like generate lots and lots of content. A lot of this research already exists within your organization because you have been around for some time. So all you have to do is maybe identify what are the key member questions that you should be answering on your website, and then finding out the answers and maybe getting someone to just like put them up on the website in a professional manner.
100%. And not only that, I mean, blogs are just one type of content. So you know, you can repurpose that content into different formats, right? It could be, it could be a blog, it could be a social media post, it could be a video, it could be a webinar. There's so many things you can do with one piece of content, right? It's amazing.
Right, right. So something that we have come across in the past is that like we will produce like a piece of content, but we publish that across multiple channels, and maybe like we will post the same blog article on like multiple publishing websites. So would Google penalize us for that, for sharing the same content?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to copy paste the same content exactly, because there's a update called Panda, and it looks for duplicate content. So yeah, you wouldn't want to share the exact same piece of content across multiple platforms. And if you do that, ideally you want to post it on your website first, so you get the original version or the credit for that piece of content. But typically you'll want to mix it up a little bit. You can kind of repurpose it. You can take the same kind of core outline, but you can kind of repurpose it a little bit. That's the key.
Right, right. Makes sense. Now, say we have started our SEO work, like how do we measure results, and like how often would you look?
So I think the key here is defining some KPIs initially. So a lot of our clients will look at things like organic search traffic increases. They'll look at ranking increases, conversion rates. So conversion rates could be, we call them micro conversion rates. So it could be things like an email newsletter sign up, and then macro would be something like a contact form request or new member registration, right? So it's basically looking at, let's define some KPIs. Let's use a tool like Google Analytics to be able to measure those, right? So we'll set up our goals in analytics, and then set those benchmarks for like what is our average benchmarks for these different KPIs, and then track them over time. So ideally what you're seeing is you're going to see ideally increases in these, but it's not always linear. Sometimes there's going to be ups and downs, and I think it's the key with SEO is just it's working with the ebbs and flows and not getting discouraged when things are going down, and trying to, it is a problem solving thing, right? Like it's, especially with Google changes, it's not always going to be the same. So it's trying to work, with that. But as long as you know your data and you have those metrics, you can make decisions based on that. So I think that's really important.
Right, right. So Brock, like for the average user, right? So do you have like maybe like one or two metrics that you would recommend that we look at?
Yeah, I would say the simplest, I think organic search traffic is a really important one to look if you're measuring SEO results, because that will show you, a lot of businesses, they might only get 500 or 1,000 searches a month from organic. So I think it's a very easy metric to see as you're creating content, you're going to see those increases. And then in terms of quality, I think an important thing to look at is the bounce rate. So bounce rate will basically tell you how people are engaging with their site. So whether or not they're clicking through on your site, whether or not they're what's called bouncing back to say the search results. So I would say if there's any two that are really, really important, I think those are them. And then if you want to become more custom, you can look at those conversions. But again, that takes a little bit more of a technical knowledge to be able to set those up typically.
Right, right. So Brock, say we started our SEO journey. We are making some changes on the website. We are creating some content, and we started off being on the third page of Google, right? So how long do you think it might take a typical organization, to get back to the first page?
That's tough. Again, it depends on the business attendant. It depends on the competition, right? So again, if you're on, let's say you're on third page for a keyword that gets 100 monthly searches, and you're trying to, generate a first page ranking. I think the key here is you want to look at, okay, what is working for those pages that are on the first page, right? So again, typically it's around content and links. So it's like either we need to create more in-depth content, right? Maybe it's adding it's adding more content, it's building a table of contents, maybe it's adding custom imagery, maybe it's embedding a video, maybe it's sharing it on social media to get more social traffic. Maybe it's, hey, we need to share it on some of our partner sites or blogs to help drive some links to it, right? So usually it's trying to assess, like, why are we not on the first page? Like, is this not what the user is looking for? So making sure that intent kind of matches up to the content of the page, but then trying some of these other digital strategies to help, again, make it. You want to make it the number one result. You want to make sure that you're looking at the competitive landscape and trying to. You don't have to copy, but you'll get an idea as to what Google's looking for and what the users are looking for just based on that alone. So again, in terms of timing, it really, really depends. I've seen some pages you make a change and within a month you can pop up to first page, but I've seen some where for more competitive keywords it can take months or a year. So it really, really depends on a number of factors.
So Brock, what you're saying is that like maybe look to see what's working for the results that are actually on the first page. Look at their website, see what they're doing right, and kind of like not copy but use ideas from there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I'll be honest, like when we were working on the SEO journey on like one of our other companies, we actually looked at our competitor and then we tried to find out like what can we copy from them, and we actually copied it like word for word, and oh my God, we actually beat them on the search results at one point.
Oh, wow.
So we started by copying, and then we improved on top of that, and maybe they were not paying attention, and then so we actually went above them at one point.
Yeah, and there's a technique. It's called the skyscraper technique. It's made famous by Brian Dean from Backlinko. He's like a SEO kind of whiz. And what it means is like, similar to skyscrapers when they're being built. Anybody who wants the biggest skyscraper, they take that skyscraper and they slap 20 stories on top, right? So it's called the skyscraper. You take a piece of content, you do it, and then you do it better, right? So that's very common in SEO.
Right. Alrighty. Brock, can you recommend any SEO monitoring tools that you typically use?
Yeah, so I mean, I use a lot of tools. The credit card at the end of the month is very expensive for all the tools I like to use. But no, I think SEMrush is probably my favorite tool, my favorite SEO tool. What I like about it is there's a competitive intelligence, so you can put in any website and it will provide you, what are the terms they're ranking for in different regions. There's built-in SEO tools. So for example, if you have a paid membership, you can create a project, you can do a site audit, you can track keywords over time. So there's a lot of like really, really cool tools within SEMrush. In terms of other monitoring tools, I mean, we mentioned Google Analytics, which I'm still a big fan of. You can create dashboards in there, and again, it's a completely free tool. And of course, Google Search Console. Again, I think it's often overlooked. It used to be called Webmaster Tools. Again, a completely free tool from Google that allows you to see performance for your website, and they've made a lot of improvements to this. They're adding really cool features to show you how your website's performing on search from mobile, desktop, image, and see the kind of things that you're showing up for, and your average ranking. So there's so many cool tools in Google Search Console. So I really recommend everybody who doesn't have that set up to sign up for that.
Amazing. Yeah. Now, Brock, I want to take it one step further, right? So say you are maybe on the first page of Google, right? And then you're getting some clicks. Once you get the click and someone comes to the website, do you have any recommendation on the pages are structured for conversion?
I mean, CRO or conversion rate optimization is a thing on its own, and even UX analysis, like user experience audit, right? That's the whole. It's, again, I mentioned it earlier, of mobile user experience. This is a big thing, because I think a lot of people have generated, like you said, they're generating the traffic. Now it's how do we convert that traffic? So step one, I think, obviously we talked about conversion tracking. You want to have that set up because you want to be able to see what percentage of people are actually completing a desired action on my website. So are people completing the form? Are they clicking on the live chat? Are they engaging with the content? So I think having that visibility into that is very important. But then in terms of user experience kind of analysis, I think there's a lot of different things you can look at. One is, strictly if we're looking at from the audience perspective, is you can build out those kind of personas, right? So it's what are the type of audience that are visiting my website, and what are they looking for? So looking at it from more of a holistic approach there with your audience. But then you can also look at it more from a technical perspective, an SEO perspective of, again, does my page have a meta title? Does it have a H1 heading and proper hierarchical structure on the page? Does it have high quality imagery? Again, does it have video? All these things tie into the SEO. So I think there's different approaches there, and there's a ton of resources on these things. If you want to, one resource I recommend is searchenginejournal.com. They have a lot of really great articles on things like CRO and trends there, and how you can, again, elevate your user experience as well. So I would definitely check that out as well.
So I guess, Brock, there's a lot of value in creating high quality content with multimedia, with imagery and videos with good headings as well. Because what I'm hearing from you is that when we create properly structured and in-depth content, number one, you're actually getting the SEO points. So meaning you'll be higher on your Google search results. But at the same time, when people click on the link and they come back to your website, the chances of them converting is higher as well, because your content is so good.
Exactly. And that's the key, right? It is delivering great content for your audience. And that's what I love about SEO, is that, when I started, or even 10 years ago or before, there's a lot of people who are, they're trying to game the system. They want those, quick wins, all the kind of things, right? And I think when you have the user in mind, your audience in mind, and you're adding that value, you're creating value for your user, that's where you will win, right? It's not about just trying to get one over on Google. It's really about doing the right things to help your audience, and that's what's beautiful about SEO.
Right. So we should be writing content not for Google per se, but write for humans to begin with. We want to write for associations. We want to write the content to answer our members' questions. But then once we have answered the questions, we need to make sure we put in the proper text so Google can actually see us as well.
Exactly, 100%.
Right. Okay. Good. Now, Brock, how much content do we need on the website? What would you recommend?
Again, this depends on it's a case by case basis with each site, right? So, I'd say typically with more established websites, when we talk about association websites, a lot of the ones that I've seen tend to have a lot of pages. It could be 10,000 pages, even 50,000 pages and whatnot. So it's not so much about, how much content, because the problem is a lot of those sites, they'll have a lot of pages, but it's very thin. And when Google sees that, and it sees that, a lot of the pages aren't even generating any traffic. I think there's a cool stat. There was an Ahrefs study in 2020 that they said 91% of website pages generate no traffic at all, which is wild. 90% of the pages on the internet do not generate any traffic. So that shows you there's a lot of fluff out there. There's a lot of thin pages. So I think the key is more so when we're creating content, making sure that it, again, like I said, is adding value, that it is in depth, you're thinking about it from an SEO perspective. So not just creating content for the purpose of creating it for that user. I think that's where you'll have success. So similarly, if you have a ton of content already on your website, maybe using a tool like Google Analytics to evaluate, hey, let's look at all our pages on our site. Let's look at all the traffic over the past year. And then if there's pages that are not generating traffic, let's get rid of them because they're not adding any value. Maybe we can take some of that content and add it to another page to make a bigger page. So I think that's really important, is kind of, it's almost called content pruning, but making sure that you're constantly kind of removing the content that's not adding value and creating content that will add value.
Right. So quality is king, I guess. We need to start by producing high quality content, and if we can combine some of the pages together, then might as well do that, prune some of the content. Okay. Absolutely. And then, like, in terms of frequency, would you recommend that we publish every week, every month, or anything else?
I mean, ideally every day, but no. I think I think it, I think this depends on the business. I think typically, I mean, once a month is a good kind of minimum standard of publishing frequency. The more, I always just say once a week is fantastic if you can, but again, I think it's better to do, if you can do one quality piece per month versus like 4 so-so pieces, I think you're better off, right? So I think it's more about the quality of the piece because again, you're better off even once per year if you do only one great piece per year versus like 12 so-so pieces. Again, I think you're gonna have more success. So I would say spend more time on creating a piece of content that again that's gonna tie into your overall keyword strategy. So for example, when you go through that keyword research process, you're gonna draw out some keywords that might have some search volume that you can kind of create a piece of content around, or a pillar page we talked about. So putting the energy towards making sure that it ties into those particular keywords. And if you're going to be creating content on a constant basis, again, once a month is fine for most businesses. You don't need to do it every day. Obviously, you'll have better results, but yeah, like you said, good quality over quantity.
Amazing. Brock, so a lot of the associations actually have multiple types of content. So say they'll probably have some webinars, they'll have like in-person events. Well, right now, not so much, but typically they will have like in-person events, webinars, events, and then like they have the blogs. So are there ways to kind of interconnect the different content pieces, like to get better results?
Yeah, I like we talked about earlier, I think repurposing is key. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. We a few years back, we created a piece of content around SEO for Shopify. So it's all around creating e-commerce, how to rank your e-commerce pages. So we created a webinar, and we had the content that we had developed for this. Basically, we had developed it for an ebook. So we had our ebook PDF. We created a webinar with similar content. Obviously, it could be more collaborative with the audience, and then created a blog out of it as well. So 3 different pieces of content. Very similar, but just in different formats. So I think it's very similar in that vein, where even if they're having an in-person event, there's going to be a slide deck. You can probably use that content and expand on it in an ebook, expand it into maybe an infographic or a blog, even in an email newsletter, tie into your email marketing. So I think that's very important, is that repurposing content, because again, different people are going to be attracted to different, channels. So even with your social media, you can take pieces of that and turn it into maybe 10, mini reels, or 10 stories, or, there's a lot of different things you can do with it. So I think that will save a lot of time on the associations have, where they don't have to come up with 20 different pieces of content, right? They can repurpose. So it helps a lot.
Right. So I guess we need to like find some sources of content inspiration, like the webinars, or their member questions, the emails. So those actually can be our source of inspiration, and then like we can create the content around them and repurpose the content as much as possible as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is too here, Farhad, that like I think a lot of people overthink it in the sense of, they look at SEO and keywords, and they kind of draw a blank. They're like, I don't know where to start. It's so much. And it's like, start with what you know, right? What are the questions you get every day from your customers, from your members? What are their challenges? What are their problems? How can you help them? How have you helped people? A lot of that, you already know that. You could probably, write 5 articles right now on a lot of those subjects. So starting with what you know and building out from there, I think is where people should be starting.
I love that idea. You know what? As opposed to taking on a huge goal, start small and do what you're comfortable with. That way you can actually build the confidence, you'll see the results, and you'll want to do more as well after that.
That's exactly it.
Alrighty. So I guess like in general, say we work with a consultant at the beginning to create some SEO strategies. So we have a strategy, but as an association, maybe I don't have the budget to actually have the consultant work with us every month. But we have a strategy, right? And we want to invest some time on SEO every month. Like how much time should we set aside, you think?
That depends on your goals. I would say, again, I would say there's, like we discussed, there's kind of like maintenance mode and there's more, aggressive mode. You could spend an hour a week, or half an hour a week, and you would be able to kind of maintain, what you're doing. Again, if you had a goal of like, hey, we want to, generate, 10 additional members per month or something like that, obviously you're going to have to spend a lot more time. And I would say, especially initially with SEO, when you're doing the things like a site audit and identifying technical issues and, doing keyword research and creating content and creating digital PR strategies, it takes a lot more time up front. Whereas kind of, once you get through maybe that initial 3 to 6 months, you can kind of go into a bit more maintenance where you can just get into a routine. So I'd say initially you probably want to carve out more time where it could be, it could be 5 to 10 hours a week, whereas long term it might only be 1 or 2 hours a week. So I think that's important to look at as well.
Right. And what I like about SEO is that like it's cumulative. So once you have done something, it stays, it sticks, and then it actually like keeps working for you on Google like over and over again, right? So it's really evergreen. So you don't actually lose the money like Google ads. If you're paying for ads, you invest the money and it's gone. Like you don't get anything back from it. But SEO is evergreen.
Yeah, as long as you're doing things right. If you're trying to cheat, then maybe it won't last. But as long as you're doing things right, you should be okay. And maintaining and staying up to date, right?
Right. Absolutely. Okay, I want to check if we have any questions from the audience. If you have any question on chat, Ronnie is asking something. Does having web pages that are low traffic hurt your SEO?
I wouldn't say it hurts it per se, but again, if in the sense of if you have, like we talked about, like if you have 1,000 pages on your website and 990 of them don't have a lot of content and they're not generating a lot of traffic, I think it can be a negative signal to Google that maybe the content you're creating is lower quality. So I think it can. Generally, it won't impact people, but it can.
Okay, sounds good. We're going to open up for questions to the audience. So if you have any question for us, like please type on chat. I'm going to take some questions from the audience that were submitted earlier. This is from Frank Lenzi. He's asking, what do you say to people who haven't started their digital marketing for their business? Where do we start?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say getting familiar with digital marketing, right? So I think there's a lot of resources out there. Google has a lot of really great, courses, training that you can check out if you want to learn more about digital marketing. I mentioned Search Engine Journal is a great resource. There's a lot of really great groups out there on Facebook, on LinkedIn, where you can connect with other business owners. It could be industry specific, and I think collaborating with others who are in a similar spot as you, I think can help and help learn from each other. So I think that's the key, is just getting that awareness of digital marketing and what opportunities there are in digital marketing.
Right. And absolutely, like when someone is just starting to learn, it will actually take you a little longer to learn if you're doing it all by yourself. So I think that is the time when you probably want to work with a digital marketer to actually give you some leg up at the beginning, like learn from an expert who has done this many times in the past, right? So, and then like maybe just get a strategy, right? So if you get a strategy, then you can start executing on that at least.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Okay. The next question is from Austin Perrin. He's asking, what is one potential SEO trend that is not popular in 2021, but you see getting traction in 2022?
That's tough. I think it's tough. A lot of the trends going on right now are kind of current. I think they're not as adopted. Like I mentioned, kind of the mobile user experience. I think web stories is a big one that not a lot of people know about or have utilized. So what web stories is, it's basically there's actually a WordPress plugin you can use, and it allows you to create, similar to like on Instagram, like a story format, but it's within Google search results, tappable story. So it's essentially creating short form content in the form of a story. And how you build that is you have to build it on your website using like specific, it's kind of technical tags, but WordPress has a plugin that makes it easy. So web stories, I think, is a really big opportunity in SEO that not a lot of people know about, and not a lot have utilized it to this point. I think that will blow up in 2022.
Wow. So are these videos, like short videos or?
No, it's not videos. It'd be like slides. So very similar to a story, how
Ah,
you tap it, and it's just kind of like you can go through like a story piece by piece, just like the Instagram stories and that kind of thing. So, but it's within the Google search results on mobile.
nice,
That's
right.
really cool.
Okay. Christy Jones is asking, what are your top choices for analytics tools for content and why?
I would say Google Analytics, 100% is the key one. I mean, that's the holy grail, uh, because you can analyze any piece of content on your site from all the metrics within that, based on based on their device, based on their region, based on your goals within analytics. So that's the key one there. Obviously, Google Search Console has a lot of really great pieces to evaluate your content, looking at things like your page speed insights, user experience. And the third I would check out is Surfer SEO. So that's a tool that can help you evaluate your content from an SEO perspective. Again, it is a paid tool, but there's a lot of cool features of that tie into your content and overall SEO strategy.
Right. And so we work with Google Analytics quite a bit, right? We create like goals and everything else on Google Analytics. And what I find is that Google Analytics is not easy to use. There's a
Oh,
steep learning curve at the beginning. But
yeah, it's a tough one. I would say there's lots there are it is technical, but I'd say if you can learn the basics of it, learn like there's probably 3 pages in analytics that I use more than any. So that would be if you go to the all channels page, where it can show you where the traffic is coming into your website. The second is the all pages. So essentially, you again just looking at all the pages on my site, it will order them by which ones get the most traffic, and then it will show you all the metrics that you need to know. For example, the average session duration, so how long people are staying on that page, the bounce rates, the conversion rates for those specific pages. So kind of once you can figure out those key pages that you're going to kind of revisit on an ongoing basis, you just have to get familiar with it. Go into the tool, play around with it. Don't be nervous or scared of it. And there's lots of resources online. There's videos on YouTube. There's trainings on Google Analytics where you can really learn to use even just some pieces of it. You don't have to be an expert in the whole platform.
okay, another question from Aaron Sander. So Aaron is asking, how do you think core web vitals are going to start affecting sites on Google search?
Well, that rolled out in August. So Core Web Vitals, essentially, it's a project by Google where they are looking at certain aspects of the site. So it actually ties directly into the user experience portion of their algorithm. So it looks at there's these metrics. I can't remember the exact one, but like cumulative layout shift is one. For example, it will be able to analyze when the page loads, if elements are moving around on the page, because if something is taking slow to load, it will kind of bump. So if that's an example of bad user experience, right? Or if there's pop-ups on the page. So it will kind of evaluate these things, and it already has taken effect. So again, I really recommend everyone check out the Page Speed Insights tool from Google, completely free tool. All you do is you put your URL in there, and it will actually give you recommendations on how you can improve your page speed scores, and it will actually show you your scores for those particular metrics as well.
Right. So, Brock, I have one question on behalf of my audience, right? So, we find that a lot of associations have their content guides and videos behind their member login, right? Because they're creating the content really for their members.
Yeah.
And so whatever is like behind a member login definitely cannot be parsed by Google. So you're actually losing out on SEO like on that front. Now, what would be your recommendation? Like how much content do we actually bring out like for non-members to use for SEO, and how much can be behind the member login?
That's a really great question. And I think that's something that, these organizations have to balance is, they want to add value to their members, hence why they would provide that content. So I think it's evaluating what should be public facing and what should not. If there's something that could be public facing, but it's only just behind the paywall because it's easier to add it there because of their process or whatever. So maybe it's evaluating that. I'm a big fan of whatever you can make public, make it public, because you're going to drive traffic. Again, if that's valuable content to your members, that's probably valuable content to some prospects as well, right? So I think that's something that's really important. And with these associations and with your members, I think leverage and collaborate with your members, because I think there's a lot of opportunities there for things like, guest blogs, building community, building directories. All these things can really, really help you in your SEO, but also help your members as well. So I think that's something they should look at as well.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, so I guess like as we build membership sites for associations, we come across this again and again. There's a lot of content like behind the member login, but they're like not presented properly on the website, right?
Yeah.
So something that we have started doing is that we actually ask our like audience to maybe like create teaser content on the website that actually can also be like used for SEO. So these are really teasers, like not really like the full form of the content. And then you actually have to be a member. You have to be a paying member to get the full content, or maybe like something that is more in depth. So it's more about a balance between those two, I guess.
Yeah, and I think you've seen it probably with newspapers, online newspapers and whatnot, where they'll actually, they'll show you 5 articles per month, and then all of a sudden, you get the paywall, and you can kind of see a bit of the paragraph. You can see it. They'll make people want in, right? So, but there is some technical aspects to that where you can still show Google the full article, but then you kind of paywall it. So there are opportunities, but I think that's a smart strategy.
Right. Alrighty. So do you have any key takeaway for our audience today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's key here that to start with your strengths, right? Of like, look, evaluating your team and what are the areas here that you can do internally, and what you need to outsource. Generally, it's around the content, right? I think most businesses know their business, know their content, know their audience better than anyone. So if you are going to bring in an external partner or a freelancer or anyone to kind of help support your SEO, your digital marketing, looking at things like, for example, if you're creating content, maybe building an outline. Build an outline and allow them to kind of fill in the blanks, right? So that's something that's key. So again, playing to your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and filling those in with external sources, I think is key. And again, just blogging. Don't be afraid to blog. I think I've always been a proponent of blogs. I think that's what helped us build our business. So I'm still a very big fan. And also just finally, like, not being afraid to try new things, right? I think there's we talked about those opportunities out there. We talked about web stories as one, even like with social, where you got things like, Instagram Reels and TikTok, and like, don't be afraid to try this stuff and play around with it. Like, that's where some of these opportunities, and sometimes it'll just surprise you, right? You throw up a couple pieces of content, and you'll be surprised with the success you can have. So I think it's not being afraid to just try something out, and even if it fails, no harm, no foul.
Right. And I guess like my key takeaway for the audience will be, don't try to do all of it by yourself. Like, work with an expert, to actually give you a leg up right at the very beginning, right? And then you can take the reins and then maybe like do the maintenance work, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Alrighty, Brock. So one last question for you. Do you want to share a personal habit that has contributed the most to your success?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say for me, it's just been routine. Like, it's just routine. Just getting into a routine, and even through over the past couple years of just you coming into the office every day. This is my zone where I'm focused and I'm productive. So it's getting that routine. But that's been important. But I'd say the biggest thing for overall for my success, for SeoPlus's success, has been just leading by example. So with the team, as we've grown, really taking it to heart to in every little action, trying to be that leader and going over and above, right? So I think that's to be an empowering leader and not trying to micromanage or anything like that, I think is really important. So kind of routine and leading by example have been some really important aspects to my success.
That is so powerful. Brock, how can people get in touch with you if they have any more questions?
Twitter @SEO Brock, and on LinkedIn, Brock Murray.
That's great. Brock, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really amazing talking to you after a long time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Farhad. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Alrighty. That was the episode with Brock Murray. I absolutely learned so much from this episode. And if you want to reach out to Brock, like for some SEO help, please go ahead. Like, he shared his contacts. And also, if you want to grow the membership of your professional association, you can always take a look at the workshops on our website. That is at gripe.ca/workshops. grype.ca/workshops. Alrighty then, I look forward to talking to you on a future episode. Bye for now.